There is only love. Do you believe it?
Yes.
Do you know it? It is the truth. So we're continuing our series for February, All the Colors of Love. And today our talk is titled, For the Love of God. Because we know God is everywhere. That love is everywhere. And it is always present and ready for us when we turn and look to it. I want you to understand that giving love and receiving love are spiritual acts. They're gateways to have an experience with God yourself. Ernest Holmes says in the glossary of Science of Mind, as he defines love, love is the self-givingness of the spirit through the desire of life to express itself in terms of creation. So it's really getting that creative juice going, that creativeness of life that's there every day, creating what it is that we see and have in our world as well as in our minds. He goes on and says, Emerson tells us that love is a synonym for God. We're also told in the New Testament that he that loveth not knoweth not God, for God is love. Love is free from condemnation, even as it is free from fear. Love is a cosmic force whose sweep is irresistible. Have you felt that sweep of love in your life? At some time, it was irresistible. It just brought you right in. And you knew that you were loved. Love can move us to action when we're paying attention, when we're keeping our hearts open and our minds open. Then love can move us into action in the world. I'll share a story to illustrate this. And it's the story of Lily. Lily was a dog, is a dog. She's a lab and something else mixed, they don't know what. And she was found alongside the road in Burlington, Iowa. She was taken to the Burlington, Iowa Humane Society. She was pregnant. She had 6 puppies. All 6 puppies got adopted. And there was Lily still at the Humane Society. Everything seemed to be fine, but then all these kittens showed up without a mother. And the workers at the Humane Society were trying to figure out what they were going to do, because to feed all of these kittens with a bottle was going to really be a lot of time and energy. So one of the workers decided, let's try the impossible. Lily just had all of her puppies adopted. Maybe she would feed the cats. So they put the kitties in with her, and she did feed them with her milk. You might think that Lily is one of a kind, but then consider the story of a cat that heard a baby fawn crying for food and took in the little deerlet. Or the goat that was raised by a baby horse. Maybe the most amazing is the leopard who killed a baboon and created an orphan. The leopard could have made that baby an appetizer for itself, but instead, it sat down beside the baboon and started to mother it. Why would an animal show such grace? Why would Lily, when one of the kittens fell into her water dish, save the little troublemaker and carry her off to safety? This is the instinct to love and nurture, and it's within each one of us when we take away all the factors and influences of our life. When we're down to who we are at the core, that's what we do. We love and we nurture. We can do it for ourselves, and we can do it for others around us. So my first point today is to let love live through us. To be open to be that love of God as our life, doing the things that we have within our power to do. What keeps you from sharing that love from your life? Have you ever watched children playing? When you watch them, you see that children don't care what color your skin is, or how your hair looks, or even what language you speak. Children are always wanting to play with one another, to enjoy the other children there. It's we as adults who teach people separation, segregation. Don't play with that person. Stay away from this guy. And so we're the ones that learn to withhold love, that don't open our hearts fully and allow others to have that experience of being loved. For all of us, we have, at times, a belief system that's unconscious. And it's due to our cultural conditioning. What have you been conditioned to do and not do in your life? What have you grown up being told this is your limitation? Now, they didn't tell you it was a limitation. They just said this is what you do. This is what you are expected to be. And did we buy into that message? I heard a story this week. It was about the Iowa elections. And this woman filled out her ballot. She left the polling place, walked outside, and started talking to some other people who had just voted. She learned that Pete Buttigieg was a gay man. She had just voted for him. She turned around and walked back in the polling place and asked for her ballot back. She said, I don't want somebody like that in the White House. The poll worker said, well, I teach my children, love is love. Is his private sexuality really any of your business? It makes us think, what are we doing? How are we living life? And what cultural conditioning have we had? Are we open to sharing with all people and seeing everyone as part of God? My second point here is to do the right thing. Why is it that we don't always do the right thing? Well, it's easier to do the right thing if we're very clear about how we want to show up in the world, about how we want to be the expression of God. If we have love in ourselves, if that's our very nature, is to nurture and love ourselves and others, then why wouldn't we want to share that with everyone? To do the right thing. What if we believed that our purpose in life was unconditional love? Michael Beckwith says, this is our real purpose for life, is to love, and to love unconditionally. We have been studying in our visioning class, Michael Beckwith and his visioning process here. He is the one that brought this whole process of visioning to the world. His process is used by businesses, business leaders, spiritual groups, all kinds of organizations will do visioning as outlined by Michael Beckwith. His work has literally impacted millions of people. Many of you will know him or recognize him with his dreadlocks. Now you may not recognize him because he shaved them off. And so I'm always a little freaked out when I see him without his hair, because it was such an iconic part of him. But let me share a little bit of Michael's story with you. Michael was a CSL practitioner, and he went through Holmes Institute, Holmes College, the same school I went through for ministerial training. When he finished his practitioner studies, he still wanted to study. And so he went on to ministerial school. He said, I didn't really intend to become a minister, but I love to study and learn. And so that's why I took myself into ministerial school. When he graduated, he wasn't thinking about having a church. He spoke at a few churches here and there, and it worked well because he had several small children at home, so he'd have his weekends to be with the kids. One of the churches that he had spoken at several times asked him if he would apply to be their senior minister. They were looking for a senior minister and were accepting applications. So Michael did some soul searching and decided yes, he would do this. So he got his packet ready and submitted it to this church to be their senior minister. The board of trustees, who was the one that reviewed all the packets and decided who was going to be presented to the congregation for their trial sermons, decided not to put Michael Beckwith forth to the congregation. One of the board members decided they should tell him that they weren't sending his name on and let him know why. And the reason they told him they were not sending his name on was because he was African American. Well, that sent him into a little time of self-searching, we'll say. And it was in that time of asking God, why? Why? Well, what now? I thought you wanted me to do this. That's where the visioning process came from. That's where God gave Michael Beckwith the download of here's how you vision. And he began to vision for his own ministry. Michael Beckwith is now the minister of Agape International, which has over 10,000 members and is a thriving church. So I know some of you would want to argue with me that everything was perfect, that this was God's will, that Michael didn't need to be the minister of this CSL church because God had something bigger for him. And I would say to you, was love being expressed? The board that turned him down because of the color of his skin was not expressing love. They were expressing limitation. What are we expressing with our life? Do we express love? Do we reach out unconditionally? Do we recognize that everyone, every being is a creation of God? And we are all one family, one human family. If we're always living and acting from love, that can change how we show up in the world and what our reaction might be. Here is a little story for you to illustrate this. Suppose that you are very, very hungry. You have $5 to your name in the world. And that $5 is laying on your kitchen counter. You're going to go to the store and buy a loaf of bread, maybe gluten-free. So you go into the bedroom to put on your shoes. And while you're in the bedroom, someone breaks into the house and steals your $5 bill off the counter. You come out and find out it's gone, you're going to be angry, aren't you? You might even try to run after them and find out who it is. You might call the police. You're going to be outraged. Now let's change the scenario. Let's say you have $5 and it's laying on your kitchen counter. You're hungry, very hungry, and you're going to go to the store and buy a loaf of bread. So you go into the bedroom to put your shoes on. While you're putting your shoes on, someone breaks into the house. They steal the $5 off of the kitchen counter. You come out and realize that it's gone, that someone has taken it. But you have $5 million stashed away in your house. How upset are you now that someone has taken the $5? It's the same situation, isn't it? It's the same thing that happened. There was $5 on the counter. and now it's gone, someone has taken it. But in the first scenario, we didn't feel like we had much else. In the second scenario, you had plenty of $5. You had $5 million there. So all of a sudden, that $5 bill, you may even feel compassion for the person that stole it. You might want to say, I wish I would have known, I could have given him more. The point is, when we surround ourselves in love, when we feel love, we receive love and we give love. This whole atmosphere of unconditional love around us, when we live in that place, we're going to have much more loving reactions to life and what happens. If we feel like we are separate from love, like nobody loves us, and that we don't have the love we desire in our life, our reaction to events in our life will be much less loving. So we want to cultivate an atmosphere of loving, an atmosphere of knowing that everything is love. And it's all around us, just like God is all around us, because God is love. If we're letting love live through us, then our life will respond different. When we feel ourselves surrounded by love, our reaction to life is different. We'll have plenty of love to share and plenty to spare. We can respond with love to life events and not hate or fear or anger. On page 297 of the textbook, Ernest says, the one who has learned to love all people will find plenty of people who will return that love. Until we learn to love, we are not sending out love vibrations. And not until we send out those vibrations can we receive love in return. It's the law of circulation here. As we give, so we receive. And if we block that receiving, it's hard for us to continue to give. So we want to be in that flow, surrounding ourselves with love, cultivating this atmosphere in our life. Are you willing to love unconditionally and to always act from love? Our third point here is to let unconditional love act through you. To be love, to be kind and loving, is to manifest Spirit through our life. To be that expression of God that we are called to be. Your choice can be to violate a spiritual principle, which is that we are love. Or we can walk in that unconditional love, sharing it. The highest calling is to live a life of love. And so I call you to that today, to think about how you can live that life of love at all times and with all people. I'll share a final story with you. This is the story of Mary and Jim and their dog named Lucky. Lucky was a little pup and was quite energetic. So whenever Mary and Jim had visitors come in, if they didn't zip up their suitcases and put everything away, Lucky would go into their room, find treasures, steal them, and take them downstairs and put them in his toy box. Whenever visitors would say they couldn't find something, Jim or Mary would go downstairs, and sure enough, there it would be in Lucky's toy box. Mary found out that she had breast cancer. She was told that it was late stages and she was going to die from this. She was really depressed. She scheduled her double mastectomy, and the night before surgery, she was cuddling with Lucky, and a thought struck her. What if I die? What is Lucky going to think? He's going to think that I left him, And I don't want him to think that I left him. I don't want to leave him. So she struggled with this. She didn't want the dog to feel abandoned. Now, Jim, her husband, was second favorite, but it was really Mary's dog. So while she was in the hospital for 2 weeks, Jim took Lucky out for his walk every night, but he would be sad and droopy and not really excited about walking. Finally, the day came for Mary to come home from the hospital. When she got home, she was so exhausted that she couldn't make it up the steps to her bedroom. So Jim made a little bed for her on the couch. Lucky stood watching her. She called the dog, but he wouldn't come over to her. And that made her sad, but she was so exhausted that she fell asleep. When she woke up, she started into a panic because she couldn't move her body. She was very hot, and she couldn't raise her arms. She couldn't raise her head. She couldn't figure out what was going on. Then her panic gave way to laughter. When she realized her problem, she was literally covered, blanketed with all of Lucky's treasures. While she had been asleep, the dog had made trip after trip from the basement up to where she was laying and brought all of his beloved toys to cover her. He literally covered her with his love. Mary forgot about dying. She and Lucky started taking walks, and every day they would walk further and further. It's been 12 years now, and Mary is cancer-free. Lucky still goes and steals treasures from people when they come to visit. But his biggest treasure, he knows, is Mary. I see love expressed unconditionally through dogs. I hope you can be willing to open yourself to see that kind of an example and to know that that is an example for us. If the dog knows how to love unconditionally, how can we not love unconditionally as well? To share with whoever. You know, the dog doesn't care if you've had a bad day, doesn't care the color of your skin, doesn't care your hair color or what language you speak. The dog only speaks love. So your homework for this week is to do the right thing, to see what gets in your way, and then take advantage of learning, being aware of that, so that you can share love with the world. To cultivate that atmosphere of unconditional love with you and around you, so that that is where you live from, and it will change your experience of life. And our third one is to live as the unconditional love of God. So that surrounding yourself with love, you have plenty of love to give and to share and to spare. So that every action and reaction you have to life is coming from love. Let us pray. We recognize that, God, you are love. You have taught us by your examples of love. Help us to keep our hearts and our minds open, to see your love all around us, to feel it pressing against us, to allow it to come into our beingness, into our awareness and into our life, so that as we surround ourselves with that knowing of your unconditional love, we can respond from that same love to everyone we meet, to everyone we interact with. And we can be your expression of love in the world. Bless us this week that we can understand what blocks us and what we can do to allow ourselves to move past our mental conditioning into that place of unconditional love and share that with the world. Thank you, God. I release my word, and we seal it by saying together, and so it is.